Mrs. Brown wanna hold I down. Yeah, no, no, no. Mrs. Brown, you're too wicked. Hey, hey, hey. Mrs. Brown, you can't hold I down. Lord, under attack from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown and Co. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from her roadside track. Mama, under attack from Heckle and a Jekyll. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from a roadside track. Lord, 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 yeah. I wanna make two. I do want to make four. I couldn't take the deal that they were giving, so I walked right out their door. Now Mrs. Brown, them a frown. Her golden goose is gone. She planned a secret war. Said she wanna even the score. Lord, yeah. Mrs. Brown, oh Lord. Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Can't hold on, Rasta. Mrs. Brown, you too wicked. Hey, hey, hey. Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Lord, under attack from Sergeant and Corporal. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from her roadside track. Mama, under attack from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown and Co. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from her roadside track. Lord, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, I tell them too wicked. So, yeah, look, Mrs. Brown, them a plot. The plot to liquor some are short. How them a forced because of them a lost. How them a furious now. Let them a threaten my life. Rumor just a fly well high. She met up a crowd and a plot. Say they wanna cut I short. Under attack from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown and Co. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from her roadside track. Mama, under attack from Heckle and a Jekyll. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack, Lord, I'm firing from her roadside track. Lord, 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 hey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh yeah. Mrs. Brown, you're too wicked, yeah.
All right, folks. Yes, good evening. Special greetings to all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. At this time, it is 5 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock in Dominica. That is the Commonwealth of Dominica and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. Those of you listening in the region, welcome on board as well. Those of you much, much further afield, greetings to you guys and welcome. Tonight in Dominica, being the 23rd night of February 2025. And yes, that is the Civic Vibes program. It is on just about that time each and every Sunday. We're about to bring you guys another program packed with information. And so we just ask you guys to make yourself very, very comfortable at this time as we're about to take flight, as it were, in just a bit. Without saying much more, let me just move across and welcome back Mr. Alvin Thomas. Good evening to you, my brother, and welcome.
Good evening, Lofty. Good evening, my brother. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Nice having you back.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. I'm happy to be back from a little sabbatical, if I may put it that way, a little three Sunday sabbatical. Really miss you guys, miss the program. And it's good to be back, of course. And to be back in such good company, I must say, that of Dr. Triffy. What a better time to get back. I could not, for want of me, miss today's discussion. But certainly, it's good to be there, and we are in fact going to have a very interesting conversation. Very interesting conversation. Most of our folks have already logged in. I'm sure most of them miss me. I'm sure I miss them too. But it's good to be back and to join the conversation again.
Yes, indeed. Alvin, again, thank you very, very much. Just before we start, just before we move across to Dr. Triffy, let me just say to you, Alvin, there's one ardent supporter of the Civic Vibes program. He's always locked to the program. And he said, Lofty, what about Alvin? I haven't seen him in 2-3 Sundays. What about him? I suspect you're not paying the brother. So remember, he's a union man, so he may be pulling a strike on you. I know that brother is listening at this time. Brother, good evening to you. So is that the case, Alvin?
That's not the case. That's not. I just
want to set the record straight.
That's not the case, but that's not a bad idea, you know.
The brother suspected I wasn't paying you, Alvin. So you pull a strike. You been that unionized brother.
I know. Yeah. I guess I know who that brother is, but I'll give it for that for now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anyway, folks, yes, those of you who are there, Ivinia Joseph, Olivia Esprit, Marshall Lawrence, Chandra, St. Val, Ramona, St. Rose, good evening to all of you guys at this time. We are about to get into a very, very interesting program, as I said before. So those of you, yes, locked in, thank you very, very much indeed. Let us just move here to our guest. Well, I shouldn't call her a guest, you know. She's part of Civic Vibes by now. She has been here a number of times, and so Absolutely. Yes, we claim her to be ours at this time. So Dr. Triffy Margaret Wallace, that is the first time I'll be pronouncing all your name, and then that will be the last time for the program. I'll just call you Doc thereafter. Good evening to you, my friend, and greetings and welcome.
Thank you, Lofty and Alvin. It's lovely to be back. I'm looking forward to the conversation because I think it's a very needed conversation. I think we're right at the time of our evolution and development in Dominica where we must address this in a proactive way and in a meaningful and thoughtful way. So I'm very happy to be here to share some of my thoughts.
Yes, indeed. I know. And the conversation we're going to have, Dr. Triffy, that is right down your alley, as it were. We are discussing a very important a very important issue that a lot of people in Dominica, really doesn't want to talk about, and that is the state of our mental health in Dominica. A lot of things basically surrounds that. A lot of things can be as a result of that. And so, we are seeing some movement in that department that is not for the best, not for the better. And so, that is the platform that we at Civic Vibes normally engage people like you and other professionals to just come and help us navigate those very murky waters at times to come up with solution or solutions in that department. So, Doc, thank you and welcome for your time this evening.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Before we start doing earnestly, let me see condolence messages on behalf of Civic Vibes to Marceline Edwards. Marceline lost her dad, I think yesterday it was. So Marceline Edwards, to you and your family at this time, I know you guys are grieving, you're in pain as a result of the loss of your dad, a man from Marigot, Mr. Gordon. Thank you very much for, just he being part of your life. And so I know Marceline is not the usual Marceline, but, we can understand why. And so, Mrs. Edwards, thank you very much for all that you do for country. And in this solemn time, you losing your dad, may you be encouraged and have the strength of character, the strength to carry on from there. So Marceline, good evening to you, my friend, and do hold on. Alvin, Marceline is a dear friend of yours, Dr. Triffy.
Yes, certainly enough.
You want to convey your condolences.
Yeah, absolutely. Marceline is a true patriot. of Dominica. And I guess part of it has to do with her upbringing that she got from her dad. Like they say, the apple don't fall far from the tree. So certainly it was as a result of that love for country, patriotism, speaking truth, being honest, standing up for justice. These are the principles that I'm sure her dad instilled in her. And that's why today she's able to speak and stand up as a responsible citizen, as a patriot to Dominica. So yes, indeed, I would like myself on behalf of Civic Vibes and my family to convey our condolences to Marceline and her entire family on the loss and the passing of her dad. Death is something I know we all do expect at some point in time, but even when it does arrive, it leaves us, emotionally challenged. And I'm sure it's no different for Marceline and the family. So certainly our best condolences and prayers are with her.
For sure. Marceline, my sincere condolences. Grief and loss. None of us is spared, yeah? None of us is spared. And when it hits home, it is really challenging. No matter how old, how young our loved ones are, it hurts. It hurts a lot. So I really want to wish you the best, one day at a time. Yeah, take it easy. Reach out for support. Yeah. Grief is not a path that I encourage anybody to walk alone. And in the community in Dominica, I think we still have it. I think we used to have it more, but we have ways that we show up for each other that help us to grieve better. Where everybody from the community comes home and everybody's helping and they stay with you. We've had the 9 nights tradition for a long time. Those things help us to bear the sorrow easier. So I hope you have that. I hope you have those resources available to you, Marceline, you and your family. And again, my deepest condolences.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Doc, for sending your condolence message to Marceline as well. And all those of you out there who may be grieving at this time, whether it is a sickness, a death in the family, some issue that you're going through, we at Civic Vibes, we want to ask you to, be strong, be strong. Today is yours, tomorrow it may be someone else, but nothing, absolutely nothing lasts forever. And so, by tomorrow in the twinkling of an eye, that situation of yours that you're going through at this time, very, very painful. It can just, vanish, as it were, and you'll be a much better person indeed. So just hang in there. Keep hope alive each and every time. Yes, folks, it is 15 minutes past the hour, and that is the time we want to make that all-important start with Dr. Triffy here talking about people's mental state, mental issues, some things that affect you mentally and can cause you to be unstable, some things that cause you to, do certain things at certain times. And so who's better to talk to this evening on that all-important aspect, the importance of one's mental state of mind. In Dominica, what we have been seeing of late is sort of an upsurge, an increase in people's behavior, as it were, doing things that would not be becoming. And so we always like to, try to stem certain things in the bud before they spiral out of control. And so, as I said, we have Dr. Wallace here with us. She that is right down her alley. And so we're going to have a conversation with her. Out of that conversation, primarily, we'd want to have some kind of call to action in terms of what can we do as a people now to help, if not, lessen, but eradicate that scourge, as it were, of persons suffering and then maybe acting in a manner as it relates to their mental state not being solid as they would want it to be. Dr. Wallace, again, good evening to you and welcome. How would you want to open up on that conversation with us this evening as it relates to one's mental state of mind?
I want to start here. I work in a prison, these days. And a lot of the guys will come up to you, you know, they notice you might be new, or, you know, they just want to make conversation, and they ask, well, what do you do? And you say, well, you're a mental health professional. And they might start leading you down a conversation where they say, well, I am mental health. I don't have mental health. I'm not mental health. And they say it in a way that many people that we grew up with in Dominica look at mental health. So there's a lot of stigma associated with having mental health challenges. The thing is, everybody has mental health. The same way everybody has physical health, you have mental health. Now, your mental health could be in tip-top shape, or it could not. So to say, well, I don't have mental health, you know, that doesn't make sense. Okay? What we need to be focusing on is, well, how do I maintain my mindset, you know, my frame of mind, the way I'm feeling in my body, the thoughts I'm having in my mind. Sometimes even my level of pain or discomfort, like physical pain or discomfort, where is that? Because an assessment of that gives you a reading on your mental health. So to say, well, I don't have mental health, it can never be a correct statement. The same way you won't say, I don't have physical health. Your physical health might be great, or you might be suffering or struggling for some reason. And no matter who you are, if you live long enough, you're going to face a time when your mental health is not all the way up there. Yeah, it might be a little down there. Yeah. And so I think, as a community of people who come culturally from groups that don't like to talk about mental health problems, we cannot, I think, continue to ignore it, because too many of our people are suffering and struggling to the point of death. So us continuing to ignore mental health challenges is life-threatening to our loved ones and to ourselves. And we have to understand that the same way we would not ignore our physical health is the same way we cannot ignore our mental health. Because doing that on the physical realm or the mental realm could be life-threatening. So that's how I want to start. That's how I want to start. You know, we grew up in families where if we saw somebody else's family member struggling with mental health, we might say, that person baking we, that person crazy, nom sala fool, you know. Or we might say somebody, you may take a bugla, right? They put something on this guy, totally ignoring the fact that the person's their brain might be working in a particular way. And the same way you might develop cancer, or you might develop diabetes, or you might develop hypertension, is the same way your body might be generating mental health illness. And it's got to be looked at that way. We have to look at it in a serious way, or else, like I say, we will lose valuable people to us when that does not need to happen.
Yes, indeed. Just before Brother Alvin comes in, Doc, would you dare, or would you mind rather spell out some of the real life situations that leads to one mental state being sort of unstable?
Okay, so the first thing is, there's some of us who everything could be going well, but the way our brain works, just by, you know, everybody's blood sugar is not working the same way, is it? Yes or no? I'm asking a question. Does everybody's blood sugar work the same way?
Not at all. Some people process
it's the same thing with the brain.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the brain. So the way my brain is releasing or not releasing certain hormones and neurotransmitters, it's not the same way yours is. So just biologically, certain people have a higher chance of suffering with brain illness. I prefer to think of it as brain illness, just biologically, because you notice in certain families, if you had a father, a sibling, a mother, a grandmother who used to struggle, say, with their mood, and in Dominica, it might not have been diagnosed because we don't necessarily do those assessments. The person, we might say, they always boo away, they're always upset, they're hasty, or they're very nervous, yeah? You are at a higher risk of experiencing those symptoms as well, because there's a biological reason for it. There's a biological predisposition for it. Okay? Okay, there is that. But then there's also suffering, depression that comes from real life. You go through a breakup, you lose things. We were just talking about Marceline. You lose people, you lose possibilities, right? You lose a job, you lose a pet. Life is not working out the way you thought it would. You keep coming up upon a lot of roadblocks. And so the stresses of life keep like winds, you know, like a hurricane. So the winds of life keep doing that. And it's going to destabilize your foundation. If you just happen to be a person who life is just unfolding for you in that way, you might not even have had a predisposition to it. But if we haven't had enough time to recover from stress number 1 and stress number 2 comes, no time to recover, stress number 3 on you, number 4 on you, and you cannot seem in your mind to find solutions that can throw a lot of us off. And like I said, if you live long enough, yeah, it pushes you over the edge. You know, we can become desperate. For many reasons, we can become desperate. Okay? And again, in our culture, we did not used to have suicide much because we had certain protective factors. We had a way of thinking, we still do to a large extent, where our spirituality, our beliefs, our spiritual beliefs say, if you commit suicide, you're going to go to hell. I realized as I was preparing for this that there are about 4 islands in the Caribbean where suicide is still considered a criminal act. So legally, if, say, you attempted suicide and you failed, you could face up to a year in jail in some countries. Yeah. In the community, there's a lot of negative talk if you express your weakness. People like to present like as if, I got it like that. I'm strong. You know, you got to, you know, buckle up, you know, stop complaining. You're just crying. What you crying for? What do you have to be sad about or depressed about? Like culturally, that's our norm. So if you have somebody who is not experiencing their life like that, how easy is it for that person to say to the rest of the big group, I'm struggling, you know? That's very tough. Very tough for a lot of people to do what really needs to be done, which is to ask for help or reach outside of themselves for support. So we have these biological reasons, but we have a lot of environmental stressors in life just by being alive that we're going to face. And some of us, again, we have misfortune in life where it keeps coming back to back to back to back, or it's such a big stressor that if you have a big cold vent, a big wind, it can topple a big tree. So even if you were strong, right, you had it together, your mind was clear, you could come up with your solutions, that situation could be something you just didn't see it coming, and you don't think you have enough resources to handle the problem. So we can go into a state of despair. You know, we can go into a state of despair, and it's like the brain feels like the brain's job is to come up with solutions. Okay. But if the brain feels like it has tried every possible solution and still more fire, some people's brain essentially it stops being flexible. It stops, it shuts down, it short circuits. And that shows up mentally, it starts popping up as a possible way to end the suffering or fix the problem. A lot of people who complete suicides actually believe they're doing their family a favor because they carry such a burden of guilt depending on the situation. They think my family is going to be better off if I'm not here. So it's not just like, okay, this pain is too much for me. Sometimes, yeah, that's people's reason. But guilt and feeling like I'm a burden, like I am no help, I am worthless, I am hopeless, I am useless, is one of those big predictive factors of suicide. But if we're not used to talking about our feelings, because talking to other people about our feelings makes us look weak, then who knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And very often you have family members, right? The survivors of the person who suicided, very confused because the person was smiling. They looked like, you know, they were getting up and they were going to work maybe, or they were going to do what they had to do. But because we cannot read people's minds, there's no way to know. And so a lot of the family members blame themselves. You know, you feel as a friend like, man, why didn't you tell me? I wish I knew, because if only I had known, I could talk to you. I might be able to talk you out of it. But it's hard to read anybody's mind. Can't do it except if they tell us what's on their mind.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alvin, are you there?
Yes. Yes, Lofty, I'm there. I'm there.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. We just wanted to pull you,
Yeah.
have you
Yeah.
into the
Yeah,
convo at this
certainly.
time. Yes. With
I
your
think
comments.
Dr. Triffy has unpacked quite a lot in the last, 30 minutes since the program started. And she raised a number of issues. But I want her to go back a little on the question. It's interesting, though, that the word mental health starts with M-E-N, men. I don't know if she could explain how that word researcher came about, but the denial part of it, because that's important, that is extremely important. And she mentioned some of that when she spoke about societal norms and behaviors and all of that. But can she speak a little more of that denial? Because I think that is at the crux of the matter. And later on, when we start to look at solutions, I'm sure she will get back to that again. But I think the denial, and especially among men, you grow up, men must not cry. Men must not show emotion. If you show emotion as a man, you're weak. You're considered a sissy. Why are you crying? A big man like you crying. What are you crying for? And we keep all of that internalized. We keep that inside. Could you speak a little more on that in terms of the denial part of it and what may be contributing to that?
For sure, for sure. Okay, so I did a quick search for the origin of the word for that man. So mental, the word mental, mens, M-E-N-S, is of Latin origin, and it means the mind. Yeah, it means disposition. Yeah, so mental disposition, the mind's disposition. Yeah, what state is the mind? Yeah, what kind of thoughts are popping through the mind? It's also related to the word heart or soul. Yeah, so what emotions am I experiencing right now? Now, when we talk about men, especially in our community, and not just in our community, but because we're focusing on Dominica, I'm going to keep it focused on Dominica. Our men are taught to be strong. Boys don't cry. Yeah, our men, I mean, I have this picture of my dad. Men come home after a long day of work and they're just exhausted. They just want to eat something, rest, shower, to go do it again, to go do it again. So you raise boys with the notion that they're not supposed to share their feelings like that. Yeah, you're not a girl. You're not a girl. You're not supposed to cry. You're a little girl. I mean, they'll call you bad words for it. You're a wuss. You're a sissy if you cry as a boy child. As a boy child, we start training our men to cut themselves off from their emotions, to hold their feelings inside. Now, that plus culturally, people don't talk about their emotions much in Dominica, not in that way. We get angry, or we cry at funerals, but when people's feelings get hurt in Dominica, you see them crying, man or woman. I don't see many people crying when they're sad. Yeah, we keep those things to ourselves. It's easier for us to access our irritability or irritation and our anger. So we might sally you, right? We might tell you words. We might give you a sitting piece, but we might hide the sadness. It's easier for us to access our anger in Dominica than it is to access our sadness and to open that place of vulnerability. We don't do that very well. We turn it into other things where we look stronger. So I look stronger if I can rage at you versus me telling you, you know what, I'm really hurting right now. Ooh, I'm really hurting right now. I think we used to do that a little better with our parents and grandparents. I'm saying that because our parents had a way where they would walk through the village. Somebody might be going up to the garden and they would stop. Everybody would stop. Everybody would say, Sakafet, how are you? And they would stand and talk, sometimes for much longer than they intended, because they actually answered the question to how are you? And people would start and say, I'm there seeing misery, but I'm not dying, right? So I'm in pain. My child did this. My husband did this. I'm pulling out my hair because of such and such. So in that moment where now we do hello and we keep moving, they might spend an extra hour providing social support, essentially being the other person's therapist. Yeah. But our life is busier now. We have less people walking. People have their stuff to go do. It's not a frequent thing. So those opportunities to do that, we don't do that as much either. Yeah. But you also add the spiritual piece. We're very connected to our faith, which is on one side a protective factor against suicide, meaning we don't want to think about the thought of going to hell. And many of us associate committing suicide with going to hell. But because of that same faith, some of us go too far with it and we say, well, if you had enough faith, you would not be feeling so sad and depressed. You did not pray enough. You're not praying enough. You don't have enough faith. And so the person in suffering feels what? Guilty and weak. If they're in suffering, clearly, well, my prayers are not strong enough. I am not a good enough Christian. So I'm just going to bite my knuckles and see if it passes tomorrow. So a lot of our people are suffering, and this is how we're dealing with it. This is how we're coping with it. So we lost our coping in the culture. We are faster. Plus, we have the weight of our spiritual expectations where, right, you need to be praying more. And we also have heard from a lot of our parents, what do you have to be sad about? You have food to eat, you have clothes on your back. What are you crying for? So these are heavy burdens, really. These are big rocks to fight against.
Yeah. Doc, as you on that point there, can you highlight the need for the very important need of being in a circle of people who support you when the situation arises?
Oh, I mean, I cannot begin to explain how much of a protection that is when you have social support, when you have at least one person you feel has got your back. Even if they're not walking through that fire with you that you're walking through, but just that they're there. And maybe I can call them, all they got to do is just be on the phone with me or sit next to me. They don't even have to tell me what to do. Most of us, we don't even need you to tell us what to do. But just if you're just there.
Yes.
Yes. So that if you do want to talk, the other person's there to listen without judgment, where they're not telling you, oh, stop crying. That's nonsense. You're making too much of a big deal about this. Where instead they're telling you, wow, man, I didn't realize that was so hard for you. You can talk to me anytime. Is there something I can do to help you navigate this situation? Oh, I know so-and-so resource. So-and-so is my auntie, my uncle, my brother. They might know who to talk to. Like that is social support. And that is that's one of the reasons our people lived to be 124. Because they would not commit suicide in those moments. They had that kind of social support.
Social support around them, yeah. And as we as you touch on some biblical principles a while ago, really answer that you just gave. Biblically speaking, I remember these kids where Job went through some suffering, as the good book says.
Sure.
And during the peak of that perilous season, I must say.
Yeah.
With all the bad news coming and his body was sawed up and everything, it is recorded there that some of his friends, they couldn't do nothing for him, as you said. They couldn't be part and parcel of his pain. But it is recorded all they did was come to sit around him and say nothing.
That's it.
For a number of days.
That's it.
And that is so instrumental in when we as human beings today going for stuff.
It's the power of presence.
Yes, indeed.
Power of presence. Yeah. And we know how to do it because we saw it being done. Yeah. And I know we're rushing to grow and change and evolve the culture. Yes. But I'm also saying we have to keep those parts of us that work, and that work well. And social support is one we do very well. We do social engagement and social support very well. And those are two of the strongest factors associated with longevity, with living to be 100. Where you have social support, you have people, I got my people. I could go to the priest even for confession. Yeah, I could go sit, talk. I might meet my friend along the way. Yeah, social support. You're not even looking for it, but somebody's going to give it to you.
It's there.
Just a little word, right? Just a little word, just a little smile where you feel like you are not alone. Because they themselves might start telling you what they're going through. And there you were, you thought you were in hell, and you hear that they're in a bigger hell even. So it helps you get some perspective. So these are some of the values of that. We do the social engagement very well where, everybody's out there doing things. There's a party, there's a CWO, there's a something, there's church, there's, games night, these things. But the social support piece, I feel like we've moved on fast from it, and we have to put it up now in the society on purpose. How do you do that? Well, we can talk about that in the call to action, yeah? Because there are things we've got to do to replace those cultural pieces of regular confession and regular, you meet your people on the street and you talk long conversations where how are you doing actually means how are you doing versus I'm okay, bye,
Yeah. Alvin, thanks, Doc. Thank you. You're muted, Alvin.
No, I think the conversation is going quite stimulating, I must say, quite interesting. And just before, while Dr. Triffield was making those comments, I wrote down community engagement, and she mentioned the fact social support and social engagement. But I'm going to pose a question here, because given where we are now as a society, fortunately or unfortunately, where do you see social media engagement? Because young people today are not congregating like you and I in those days where we play cash mabel, knots, marbles, and all that kind of thing. Lofty might be a little too young to know cash mabel. So
Alvin, I am not as young as I look, you know. I am not as young as I look. But go ahead.
But Dr. Trivy, I'm sure you remember us playing those games before. Young people now on their cell phones and their tablet and their whatever it is. I don't want to say to use the word, I'm trying to be very careful. Can that be a substitute? Okay, how can we engage that then to do some of that social support or social engagement that we just spoke about? Because it's a 360-degree change now. I'm not sure we can turn it back, but how can we work with what we have?
Well, one area, I think, from a public health standpoint, and I say public health because public health in the country, my hope is that they have access to resources, right? Like they can do it on a bigger scale. Because, of course, individual practitioners, you know, like I could say, well, okay, I'm going to go do this. Okay, I'm going to do that, right? And yes, one fills the basket, but suicide prevention is a public health issue. Yeah, it's a public health issue. So prevention has to be looked at, evaluated from that perspective. Okay, we're talking about social media. We need trained people. We perhaps need more trained people. I know we have good professionals at home. We don't have enough good trained professionals at home. When it comes to social media, there are many mental health support groups in the social media space. Many. There's addiction groups. Right now, if you type in addiction group, free, Free, right? You can join a group of people from around the world right now. Depression management group, a grief and loss coping support group, an anxiety management support group, relationship, recovering from relationships. Every possible group is available online. Every possible group. But if we're looking at it maybe from a public health perspective, we can, and you know, you want to focus it on your people because maybe our people might not feel as comfortable talking to, you know, other people. You just never know. I would encourage our public health department to consider using Zoom, if you want to keep it private and confidential and you don't want it to be like a public group, use the Zoom space or have somebody create an app for you that is just, you know, yours particularly, and you use it to provide mental health support services to younger people. And we definitely need more people who are trained to do that, because with mental health support, sometimes people can do more harm than good. Yeah, you could end up harming people unintentionally because you're not trained well enough. It's like a doctor might know just before you finish training, you could hurt a person more than you help them. Yeah, so which is why training is important, but enough resources on that level to be able to provide for our own. Like I said, there are many groups right now. Today I will tell any young person to go ahead and look and see if there's a group online that feels comfortable for you. But as an independent nation, from a public health perspective, we can have a suicide prevention, a focus, you know, as a country. Yeah. And we can utilize those resources, those tools. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks, Doc. Thank you very much. It is 6:45. Those of you maybe just tuning in at this time, you're 45 minutes late, but rather late than never they say. We're talking to Dr. Triffy Margaret Wallace, talking on to us about a very, very important issue, not just in Dominica, not just in the region, but globally, as it pertains to one's mental state of mind. And in terms of mental issues surrounding people, whenever some things come around, read that, as Dr. Wallace said a while ago, that may rock them off the boat, as it were. So we'll give you a chance to call in at the top of the hour if you want to do so. And also Alvin and I will be going through the comments. We know some of you have been commenting there, and we'll punch those comments. Those comments that are directed at Dr. Wallace in terms of requiring an answer indeed. But Doc, let me ask you a very specific question at this time, seeing that you talked about suicide a while ago, and the trend that we are seeing in Dominica is that is on the upper end of things, moving up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, Doc, give us the 1, 2, 3 steps, as it were, or the process that is involved in before one actually commits the ultimate act of taking one's life?
Well, that varies for people, but if you were going to assess, if you're going to evaluate someone to kind of get a read on where they are, in that process, and if you think they were low risk or, moderate risk or high risk, you might do something called, that many people refer to as the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps. You might want to get a sense of if that person has past attempts of suicide. Have they tried it before? And maybe nobody knew about it. Yeah. Past attempts. There's also something called passive suicide, passive suicidal attempts, where people are cutting themselves, where people are overeating or not eating enough. They're anorexic, they're starving to death, or they're eating themselves to death. There's also indiscriminate sex, unprotected, where people are like, if I go, I go. There are people who are starting stuff with cops so they can get shot. Yeah, these are all behaviors that people are engaging in that are, they're basically saying in a passive way, if I go, I go. Okay, so past attempts, number 1. Another P is any plans, any current plans. Any current plans. And you want to ask the question because you want to know. If you don't ask, you just, there's no chance of you knowing. And some people feel anxious about asking because they think, well, I'm going to put the idea in their head. I'm sorry, you're not going to put the idea of suicide in somebody's head just like that. So you want to ask. Yeah. And then the 3rd P is probability. Well, what's the likelihood that the person has access to a way to commit the act, especially based on the fact that they just told you they have plans? Well, if you have plans, how are you going to do it? So we ask. Okay. And you're not asking in a shocked way or in a what you saying like that? No, you're just having a conversation. Yeah. If you did it, yeah, if you were to do it, how would you do it? Do you have a way? Do you have means? So especially for our men have higher numbers of completed suicides, even though our women might have more attempts. Why? Because men tend to use more lethal means to do it. So if there are weapons in the house, there are guns in the house, we need to know that so that we can remove your access. So your probability is going to decrease a little bit. If the means you're saying is, I want to use some medication, I'm just going to overdose on my pills, my medicine, might be for my physical health. I'm going to go to the store and overdose on this. You want to remove access so you can decrease the probability. Because one of the reasons that people who are suicidal get placed under 1-to-1 watch where sometimes they'll strip them down so that they don't even have access to shoelaces, to clothes, because if a person is very serious about it, they can use a shirt to do it, shoelaces to do it. Yeah. So you remove things that decrease the probability of it happening. And then we look at preventive or protective factors. What can keep this person alive? Do you have any reasons for living? And if you cannot come up with it because your brain is just, ooh, it's stuck, everything you've tried, and you're in that place, maybe we can help the person identify some reasons for living that they even forgot. Their brain was not even remembering. Like your children, like the trip you want to take next year, like the promise you made to your grandmother that you would do ABC. You haven't done it yet, you still need time to do it. Yeah. So helping people identify protective factors. Do you have a higher power? Is a protective factor, because now we can remind you, well, you can pray, if you need some extra support. Yeah. Do you have friends? Do you have a group? A support group is a protective factor. Yeah. So the 4 P's, our way we can find out where in that thinking process is the person. How serious are they? Because they could say, well, yeah, I tried when I was a teenager, and that's kind of in the far past. Yeah. And I think about it sometimes, but not often. Yeah. That person's at lower risk than a person who said, well, I tried last year and they had to take me to the hospital. They had to pump my stomach out. And I was thinking about it last night. And yes, I have weapons at the house. So this person needs to go to a hospital. You see what I'm saying? So there you have information, right? So I've just given you information. If you're a regular person, but some questions to ask your loved one. If they're looking depressed, if they're saying things like, I'm tired of this life, this is too much for me, I can't take it anymore. When words like that start leaving our mouths, we're in a state of passive suicide,
Okay, Doc, thanks much so far. I'm glad you're touching on some of the points or some of the telltale signs of someone's intent to go down that road. What about the loners? These people just there, they say nothing, they do very little much, and you think all is well.
Yeah.
How can you detect those?
Well, the loner is perhaps outside of our reach. So anytime you feel as if the problem is too big for you, it means you must go outside of your circle, outside of whatever it is I'm doing right now. If my child is a loner, that means I need extra help. So I need a professional. I need to get them to a hospital. And if you're in Dominica, we need to go to the emergency room, even if we might have to wait for 10 hours. Because not knowing is not helping anybody. So we go to the professional who might know how to ask them the question, who might know how to build a rapport with them where they feel safe enough to say, who might be able to read beyond the words that they're saying and to hear more. Yeah, what you might miss because they're trained to listen in a particular way and us at home, we're not.
Yeah, sure. Alvin, you have been taking notes, I guess. You have been listening and learning.
No, yes, as I said, the conversation is quite intriguing. And I was about to ask the last question that you asked, because you do have a situation where, take, for example, a couple in the house, and the husband, everything seems to be okay. You don't seem to recognize, I mean, it's not a question like Dr. Triffy mentioned earlier. He's not eating, he's eating. He's not making any comments that sounds weird. And then this thing happens. And the wife or the sister or the brother, whoever, feels guilty.
Yes.
Because you you keep telling yourself, but what on earth did I miss? How did I not see that? I spoke to the guy last night. I spoke to him yesterday. He came by me. We had a casual conversation. And I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's one of the areas I'm sure I would like her to speak to. You know, you are in a grief mode now. So your mental state of mind now is starting to be affected now. So what I'm trying to find, what is it that, how do you find out the missing signs? Is that something at all? The loners, I understand, because there's loner, go find help. But he's not a loner. He appears, quote unquote, to be okay. How do we, what is it that the trigger? And speak to the question where you now is carrying some guilt because you feel that I missed something that I could have caught.
Yes, that's a heavy burden that survivors of suicide experience. So you have the person who suicides, a lot of them, they feel so much guilt and they feel like they were a burden to the family. And so they do the act. But then the doing of the act leaves the people around them feeling guilty that they missed many signs. And yes, clearly, sometimes there are signs like a person might start giving away their prized possessions, things they really, were very special to them. They start giving it away. All of a sudden, they want to write a will. All of a sudden, they're busy for life insurance and they might have been against it for a long time. Some of those things, often though, we see that in the rear view mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is one of those tasks of mourning that survivors have to grapple with. In the end, yeah, we can love our people. They could be our twin. They could be our spouse or kids. There is no way to know 100% what is in somebody else's mind. None. No, because they can tell you this and do complete opposite. Yeah. So we have to have grace for ourselves and compassion for ourselves. And a principle I learned called autonomy, understanding that every soul has autonomy, gets to decide what they're going to do with their life and their body. Yeah. So some people refer to suicide as the soul's choice, where you understand that, there are some people who have been through every hospital and they still complete a suicide. There are some people who the family knew they were struggling and they still complete a suicide. There are people who complete a suicide while they're being watched by medical professionals. So in the end, there is that understanding that every human being has a fundamental right to think, feel, be, do whatever it is they're going to do. And, anger and rage can be part of our recovery. A lot of us, when we lose people by suicide, a lot of confusion. Of course, the sadness is there, but part of the acceptance process is realizing that the other person, every other person, including me, we have a right to do whatever it is we're going to do. And that there is no way, there's nothing to say that if you had known they were going to do it, that they would not still do it. Because I'm telling you now, there are people we have under watch who will still complete a suicide. Yeah. It's painful reality, but it is a reality.
The reality, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lofty, we are right on the hour.
Yes, Alvin, we are on the hour. It's 7 o'clock. And so, yes, we're about to take that all-important midway break. At this time, again, we want to thank Dr. Triffy Margaret Wallace for coming to spend some time with us here this evening, talking on a very, very important topic, one's mental health, indeed. Doctor, we have some questions for you after the break. And so, just be ready for those questions. We also will be going to the live feed in just a while to get some of the comments and other writings and commenting here. Let's take that all-important break at this time. We'll be right back in just a bit. I started with this one. Let me see if I can rerun it in terms of the under attack situation where Mr. Nasio Fontaine sings about in song Under Attack. Seems as if, yes, we're under attack of late. That is what this conversation is all about. The numbers to call into the program, 245-2396, 615-9470. They are on your screen as we speak.
Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Oh.
Just in case, huh?
Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Yeah, no, no, no. Mrs. Brown, you're too wicked. Hey, hey, hey. Mrs. Brown, you can't hold I down. Lord, under attack from friend and foe. From Mrs. Brown and Co. Under attack, Lord, you're firing from her both side track. Mama, under attack from Heckle and a Jekyll. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack, Lord, you're firing from her both side track. Lord, 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 yeah. I wanna make two. I do want to make four. I couldn't take the deal that they were giving, so I walked right out their door. Now Mrs. Brown, them a frown. Her golden goose is gone. She planned a secret war. Said she wanna even the score.
My friend in Botswana listening and locked in at this time. Thank you very much. She's saying here a lovely conversation indeed. I'm learning a lot, huh?
Brown, Mrs. Oh Lord.
Friend from Botswana.
Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Can't hold on, Rasta. Mrs. Brown, you too wicked. Hey, hey, hey. Mrs. Brown, wanna hold I down. Lord, under attack from Sergeant and Corporal. Them have a bigger time plot. Under attack, Lord, firing from her both side track. Mama.
So all of you here with us, good evening to you. Thanks for your company each and every time.
Brown and Coke, under attack, Lord, firing from her both side track. Lord, 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 yeah. Oh yeah. I tell them too wicked.
Alvin, let me read a comment here.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that comment is from none other than the man, Mr. Arundel Thomas. He says here, good evening, my brothers. I am tuned in as you are correctly observing. It is very good to see that the industrial dispute has been settled with the union leader. Let me take that again. It is good to see that the industrial dispute has been settled with the union leader. You hear that corning laugh. He seems satisfied with the outcome of negotiations. Great work, Lofty. Welcome back, Brother Alvin. I'm anticipating an informative and exceptional conversation with Dr. Wallace. So good to know, my brother Alvin, that dispute has been settled as per Mr. Arundel T.
Oh boy.
Man from where? Laku Set Lang.
Laku Set Lang.
Good evening to you, my bro. Are we under attack?
Myself defense. In the book, you know. Lord, I got to reload now.
All right, folks, it is 5 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock, and that is where we have to make a move back to the live panel here. Dr. Triffy Wallace is here talking on a very, very important issue of our mental health. Doc, one question straight up from the man, Mr. Arundel Thomas. He asked, could you ask Doctor to explain exactly what is mental illness and the different types of that sickness. Again, what is mental illness and the different types thereof?
Okay, so there are many types of mental illness. Again, everybody's got mental health. Everybody's got physical health. But sometimes our body's not doing great. Sometimes our mind is not doing great. Sometimes our emotions are not doing great. Yeah, for whatever reason. We can have, I mean, the list is endless when it comes to events that can trigger our feelings to go, for us to get sad, anxious, mad, frustrated. Yeah. And then their thoughts, any number of thoughts could start riding us, so to speak. Yeah. But usually we're responding to things that are happening to us. And we might have a certain way that we're perceiving what is happening to us. That's more environmental. There are some mental illnesses that are more brain-based. Yeah. And you have groups like psychotic disorders where people have visual. When I say visual, they might see things that other people around them might not see, or they might hear things that other people are telling them, well, I'm not hearing it. So they're having different perceptual experiences than the other people around them. That's complete brain chemistry. That's not, I'm making that up, or, I'm pretending. That's just the way my brain neurotransmitters are working. Yeah. You have depression. Depression is one of the mood disorders, like depression and anxiety. They're mood disorders. Now, everybody gets anxious. Yes, you're a human being. You're going to have to do something new. You feel a little anxiety. But if you start feeling anxious for no reason, your body's having these responses. You start shaking. You're like, why is my body shaking? Why are my hands shaking? I'm not getting ready to do a big speech. I'm in the middle of combing my hair. Why is my heart beating so fast? I'm not afraid of anything. Nothing happened for me to feel afraid. And why is this happening for so long? Yeah, for weeks and weeks, this is happening. Months and months, this is happening to me. I go to the doctor, they do an MRI, they take my blood work, nothing else is going on. You're dealing with an anxiety, perhaps, an anxiety disorder. Yeah, or things have been happening in your life or not. Again, some of us, it's the way our brain works. Okay. Your appetite is, you lose your appetite, say within the past 2 weeks, you lose your appetite, you can't sleep. It's hard to fall asleep. When you do fall asleep, you get up, you're tossing and turning, your sleep gets impacted. Yeah. Your energy level gets impacted. It's hard for you to get up out of the bed. Yeah. You might be irritable and you don't know why you're snapping on everybody. Some people also have high anxiety with depression. Okay. Some people will see things and hear voices with depression as well. Okay. And you have many other psychological disorders. You have attention disorders. A lot of our kids are struggling in school because they cannot focus. Their brain is working in a way where it's hard for them to focus. A lot of these kids end up, as they get older, with bipolarity, where they have mania, where they're very happy, excited, they can do everything in the world, and then they crash and they are very depressed. So they're back and forth between feeling excited about life and then down. Yeah. And some people have a mix and match of that. Some people have all of that going on at the same time. So there's a lot when it comes to mental health disorders. If you're feeling not good in your body, yeah, your task is to ask for help. Go to a professional. There are many people who that's what they know to do. That's what they've trained to do. They will help you. The problem arises when you don't have access to resources to be able to get that done, to be able to get good evaluations. Yeah. So you know what's really happening with me. Am I dying? A lot of people are having panic attacks, but they're thinking, my heart is what's the problem. You take them, you either get an EKG, there's nothing wrong with your heart. Really, though, when you start digging, well, I lost my father 2 years ago, and then my auntie died, and then look, I just lost my job, and then all of this stress is coming at me. Yeah. And that might explain what's happening with you, but you need to go to a professional to be able to get that information.
Yeah. Doc, as we on this last hour, and we are dedicating this hour to a solution, a couple of solutions that as it returns to mental health situations in Dominica. Speak to the situation of the importance of a helpline or hotline, some avenue, some aspect that some persons who are, contemplating on the edge or, just want to just inquire about, speak to the importance of that. We spoke to the network before, but that, direct line.
Yeah.
Of
The biggest word I want people to leave here with is support. Support, social support. And, we talked about social support on a one-to-one level, but a helpline is a way to apply social support, isn't it? I'm going through something. I don't know what it is I'm really going through. I just know I'm feeling out of control. I'm feeling too sad. I'm feeling too anxious. I'm talking, my people are telling me I'm saying things. They don't understand what it is I'm saying. They're confused by my words. I don't even understand what I'm saying. Over here, we have 911. Over here, we have 988. Over here, you have 1-800-SUICIDE. What I'm saying is we have to come up with those kinds of systems and structures in Dominica to provide support for our citizens, remembering that everybody will deal with some kind of mental health challenge at one point or another. And it might never get to the level where you need extra support, but one of those days it might. Yeah. And it might be my child that needs it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Alvin, yes, thank you. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah. Just on sort of quickly, if you could speak to that. Out in the US, you hear this term used, ADD, children suffering from attention deficit disorder. And is that something that has some effect to the brain, and is that something that can go into adulthood? Because I think earlier you mentioned the fact that if one parents act in a particular manner, there seems to be a likelihood that the offsprings are going to, So, and also while you are addressing that, what role does diet play in all of that? Food for the brain. I mean, there is the thought for the brain, the social support, but what about the food for the brain?
Well, here's the thing. It's a powerful question, eh?
Yeah, I know.
Question, because food is the precursor to food determines
your balance.
Your balance. Food determines am I getting enough of this nutrient that is responsible for this building block in this neurotransmitter. Yeah. So that's the root, right? So food is very important. What we're eating, how we're eating, how much we're eating is very important. And so a lot of people will find support and they will team up. You might have a collaborative approach, or you might even only work with a nutritionist. If you have the money, if you have access. But when it comes to ADD, I know a lot of people say, oh, they just need a good whooping, just tell them behave themselves, sit down and listen, But again, the brain does what the brain is doing. And there are many people who respond positively, many children who respond positively to medication support. There are also many families who report good results with changing their children's diets. That's how I will answer that question. But understand that food, food is medicine. So what I'm taking in is going to impact what is happening in my body.
Right.
And I can change what's happening in my body by changing what I'm eating. I just need to know from somebody who knows better what I need to be eating to create what it is I want in this brain, in this body.
Yeah, absolutely. Lofty.
Yes, I'm there. Doc, we in Dominica, we have a very sluggish economy. And Alvin, take note or see if you can see through some of the comments in the live feed, because we need to get some of these comments into Doc. Doc, we have a very sluggish economy in Dominica. And when you go across the country, you meet people, you hear the stories. And trust me, some of the stories, you can tell that it is affecting them mentally. Can you help the ordinary man, woman in Dominica now as we speak, who may be going through some sort of stress? You kept using this word tonight. Some sort of stress, as to what can they do when these stressful situations come upon them as a result of being not able to provide for themselves, their family, their children, their people in their care.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to these people now, in a more intimate manner as it relates to coping with that kind of stress, as it relates to a struggling economy like Dominica is?
I just got to say, I'm really sorry this is happening to so many people. And I mean, if I was talking to somebody right now, I would start off with that. I'm really sorry that this is the reality, because not knowing if I'm going to be able to provide for myself, financial problems, one of the biggest stressors in life, because it's about our very basic needs. It's at the bottom, right there, the very, very basic needs, before we can even move up to things like worrying about the future and worrying about life and is my mental health okay. If I cannot guarantee that I have food, clothing, and shelter, is very destabilizing. So if that's not working, we're already, many of us, it's like the wind is too strong. So when other things happen in life, it's very destabilizing. Yeah. So the way I see it, the way I've seen it, I don't think that's going to change quickly. So I think people have to start looking at it kind of like rough. When I say rough, I mean like, you got to fight for your life. You got to look at it like you're fighting for your life, because this situation, we can pray. I know we love prayer as a way of coping, but I think we've been praying a lot. You know what I'm saying? And our faith without works is dead. So we have to do things. We have to do certain things now. See, so if I don't have money, I have to come up with strategies to create money, to put myself in a position to be able to care for myself first and my family. Yeah. So we have to do certain things. I'm going to say I don't have all the answers when it comes to that, but I know something that works well everywhere you go, and that's community, and that's collaboration, and that's working together. Okay? And that's starting with what I have, but starting somewhere. Yeah, to be able to build and create without having to depend on whatever it is that keeps pulling the rug out from under me. So I have to do things in a different way. Yeah. Mentally, we need to be able to cope. How do you cope? You cope with praise, a good one, yes, but changing the way you're talking to yourself, changing your thought patterns from negative, which it's very easy to go there when you see you don't have money. It's very easy to feel hopeless when you don't have money and afraid. But you have to change what you're saying to yourself. You got to find other people with like minds who can help pull you up. So we're not going to be hanging with the people who is more, the crying die. No, we're not hanging there. We're hanging with people who, let's do something together. Let's collaborate. Can we, what can we sell together? What can we grow? What can we do? I feel like we have to get, you're in a desperate situation. Desperate situations call for desperate measures. And even if you cannot change the system, that is imposing so much pain on you, you got to change what you're doing in the day-to-day. So fundamentally, you're fighting for your life. You got to start growing your food. Okay, if I don't have a job, I need to be, whatever little piece of land in the back of the house, I need to be growing my food. And I need to be using my phone, figuring out how can I provide for myself and my family, even if I have to do it myself, because that's where we are. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. Yeah, you got to fend for yourself. You got to get, I think we have to get back to that. It's a fight for your life. It is a fight for your life, because that kind of depression and anxiety is life-threatening. But you don't want to give up. You don't want to give up. If it's too much for you alone, maybe you and your sister can say, okay, you'll dig the soil and I'll plant the seeds or something, but we got to start taking care of ourselves and trying to do it in community. Because the alternative is to be very hopeless. I just cannot understand to be in that kind of level of stress, like day in, day out, day in, day out. It is very destabilizing. It makes your body sick. It's too much pressure for too long. So you have chronic stress. It wears you out. It wears you out. So I feel like we have to tap into our autonomy. That word again, autonomy, where, you know what? I'm a divine soul. I'm here. I'm still alive for a reason. What am I going to do? What am I going to do different? And I must do something different so I can get a different result. Yeah. And if I'm going to hurt anyway, well, let me hurt and be patient as I start doing these new things. I start planting for myself. If I'm losing my job, I've got to find a way to survive.
Yeah, thanks. Doc, a question rather from the live feed. Marshall Lawrence asks you here directly. Are you part of a team in Dominica that deals with the topic we are discussing this evening? Or are you prepared to be part of a team as well? I am adding now.
Am I part of a team? Like what kind of team?
I guess you're professional.
Yeah.
Am I part of a team in Dominica? No, I support from time to time groups. I just finished a virtual clinic, like an annual virtual clinic where I do free therapy. But I'm not part of a team in Dominica.
But would you be willing to lend your hand in that regard?
Absolutely. I have, speaking of teams, I have committed to at least one team where I will do that for them and be accessible and available to them. I am definitely, absolutely.
Yeah. Because, for example, Doc, this helpline that we spoke of earlier, how difficult is a line like that? How do you go about setting up a line, a helpline, a hotline like this?
A hotline like this, you need dedication, you need commitment. Over here, you have people who are paid. They're just on 24/7. They work in shifts. If there's a crisis, they go out to the home. If a person needs to go to the hospital, they take them to the hospital. There's like an ambulance, system connected. It's called a mobile crisis system. And you call that one central number, and somebody on the other line will do a quick assessment to see, based on what people are saying, right? Some of those questions I asked there, how low, how moderate, how high is the risk? And depending on, then that mobile, the mobile crisis vehicle goes to that address, takes the person to the hospital. The hospital does the evaluation and keep the person usually for observation. They'll determine how long the person has to stay for observation. This might have to stay long, maybe not so long. The person might need to be referred to like a substance abuse treatment, something, So that's why I'm saying it's a public health, because you see the amount of resources you would have to really make it work.
Yeah.
To keep it sustainable, you need to be able to hire a few people who can commit to being on the phone for 8 hours shifts, because when somebody calls in, somebody's got to respond. Yeah, so you can't be working full time and you're working 8 hours on a shift, right? You can volunteer time, but even so, if you're working a full-time job, you might be able to only volunteer 2 hours, 4 hours. So we're talking about sustainability. Is something, it's not like, well, okay, 5 of us, we're just going to come together and we're going to do this, because the 5 people have to work full-time. So it has to be, well, you have to be able to sustain it. You have to be able to sustain it. Yes, Alvin.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a collaborative approach. It's something that has different parts to it that have to all come together. I agree with you entirely. But let me ask you though, earlier on we stopped, and I'm asking that question as more in terms of Dominica, the setting here. Because even in the United States, you have folks who are in denial of mental health issues. And they feel, oh, my child is not, it's not a mental health issue. And it's a big issue in the US as well. But in Dominica's context, how do we deal with the education part of it? Because like you said earlier, there's this taboo that men should not complain. It's a woman is more likely to go share with another woman, or even with a doctor. A man would internalize, unless he's very, very close with another partner, friend, he will say, well, boy, I'm going for a go well there, boy. This woman left me, whatever. So how do we deal with the education aspect of it to take that stigma out? And because at the crux of the matter, it comes down to education.
Yes.
Apart from the professionals, yes, which I agree to, but how do we get people to accept the fact that this is real? And therefore we need to say something and do something. How do we get to that point?
I see 2 avenues. I see school and I see churches. So I see in the education system, we used to have civics. We dealt with a lot of these things in our civics class. This stuff would come up and the teacher would guide you through a lot of the stuff. Yeah. When I taught at St. John's, we had a life skills class where we would talk about these things. There was an opportunity to process thoughts, feelings. I found out many things and many ways I could support my kids through those classes. So I think that has to be part of the curriculum. Yeah, normalized. You normalize it that way. Yeah. The churches can step in. Over here, many churches actually house, and many of them support, say, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the recovery groups. So many of the a lot of mental health is happening in churches here. So they offer the building for people to meet, for a support group, for grief recovery, things like that. That helps to normalize the idea that, we all struggle sometimes and we need a little mental health support. We need a little support. So those big, again, you can do one fills the basket, or you can go big or go, go hard, go big, or go home. The churches are very powerful. And the churches, like I said, when it comes to suicide, we have that one side where our faith keeps us from committing the act, many of us, but then our faith, the way many people interpret the faith, they also say, well, mental health, don't go to anybody, they'll play in your head. You need to talk to God about it. We have to destigmatize it in church. So we need pastors and priests who are educated, to normalize the congregation getting mental health support. And if they can call it another name if they want. They can call it life skills, they can call it support group. You understand?
Yeah.
But the end result is that people are getting more support. We need more social support in the system in Dominica. We need more social support.
So the schools and the churches, yeah.
Schools and the churches, yeah.
Edna Ernest on the live feed is asking her, what if you are physically disabled? how are you going to fend for yourself? I guess she's piggybacking on a point you made earlier about talking about defending fending for yourself. Added to that here, beloved Garaway says here, in the absence of the backyard that you spoke of, plant in flower pots and other containers. Basically,
we have to get creative. We have to
yes.
get creative or die. Well, that's the reality, right? You get creative to stay alive, or you die. That's the Hunger Games. But that's the reality, because nobody's coming to save you. So we have to understand how to save ourselves. If you are disabled, back again to how we used to be, and we've decided that's not working for us anymore. Nobody who was disabled was going to bed hungry. Not one. Because somebody would be leaving a little extra food for that person. Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
So we have given up some things that work for us, and we have to decide, survive or die. We have to decide.
Yes, one of the situations there that is a sure deterrent or hindrance to people getting help from mental issues, no matter where it stems from. It is the situation and it is the reality in Dominica that I know of, whereby someone would be maybe going through whatever it is. And the very same people that they have to go to, quote unquote, report these things to in order to get some kind of help. These are the same, quote unquote, professionals who either participated or are participating into these people's mental health being disrupted. Can you shed some light on that now in terms of how do these people deal with that reality?
That is really the most disgusting thing I have ever heard. And I say disgusting as in dirty, dark, just disgusting. That's just disgusting. Yeah. Okay. That means you don't go there. That means that's not where your rescue is. Yeah. So survive or die. Then we create new pockets of rescue. And it might be pastorally, like with your priest. But then again, some people might say, well, the priests are not always trustworthy. Yes or no? Because a lot of, it's for a lot of people, it's out of the frying pan into the fire. Community, we have to save ourselves. Community.
Yeah.
Just before Alvin and you go further, Doc, let me be a little more direct with you based on what I asked before.
Okay.
Here's the situation in Dominica where, for example, some people may be going through the mental situation of being sexually abused.
Can't go to them. That's crazy.
Now, some of these same people who are quote unquote in these high places and are supposed to be helping people in times like this, these are the very same people who are culprits of the fact that these people have been exploited sexually by some of these very same victims.
That's disgusting.
And so that is why I asked before. I'm just being a little more direct now so that we could get a better grasp of the reality in Dominica. Some of our policemen in Dominica, Doc, they are sexual predators. I say that without absolutely no reservation. Some of our people who attend to people from even the healthcare aspect of things, they take advantage of some of these people when they come to them with these very trying situations / problems. You mentioned some of the priests and pastors. I don't want to paint everybody for broad brush, but that is the reality we are facing in Dominica as we speak.
That's disgusting.
On the economic end, some of our representatives that we go to, sometimes for help, they exploit that situation for favors in return. Some of our employers, young ladies, young men, go to them to be gainfully employed so that the stress of lack of finance or lack of whatever it is would be reduced. Some of these employers, they take advantage of these young women, these young men.
That's disgusting.
And so the list goes on and on and on. And I am asking you, Doc, where do some of these people turn for help in times like these when they are between, as it were,
A rock and a hard place.
and a hard place?
Oh my God, you're basically asking me to solve the culture. You're asking me to reconstruct the culture then. Oh my God, you're asking me to reconstruct the culture. If you have nowhere to turn, if you've got a phone, if you have a phone, Google. And as I mentioned before, there are many, many, many organizations on social media that you can get support from. Okay, so I would not don't go to the people who re-victimize you. Don't do that, except if you must. Again, I think we have to understand then that nobody's coming to save us because the people who are supposed to save us are also hurting us. So people have to collaborate and form community with like-minded at the grassroots level, on a small level, and reach and bypass. So do that, do what you can together on a small scale and bypass the predators and go outside of the country for help. Yeah. So social media is a way to get that kind of support. Read, there's YouTube, but when it comes to community social support, there are many groups on Facebook. And I would say just type in what it is you need. You need depression support, you need grief support, you need relationship understanding support. There are many free groups available online right now. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Randy,
yeah.
Rodney.
That system is not gonna give way right now. It seems quite entrenched and everybody's supporting each other because the correct answer is a legal answer. But if you're saying the police are also involved, then, you know, who's going to save you? Yeah.
Who's God in the garden? Randy Rodney is writing here, and he has earned some. All right, let me see if we could take that caller before we get to Randy. Caller, yes, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Doc. Good evening, Brother Alvin.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
So, Lofty.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think things like you know, especially this sex program issue, you know, it really is not a personal solution protocol. I mean, it is one of those things that we can only solve through a collective process. I think it's important that we realize that you know what I mean, because this is not just Dominica, this is cultural. I mean, universal. You have an amelioration of these things in bigger societies because they have the finances to have institutions. But the only way we can really tackle this is through that same approach. We have to have a sense of governance that provides these institutions and that legal framework that people have something to call back to make examples of perpetrators. If you do not have that kind of institutional and collective approach to the problem, it never gets solved because these people, remember, you know, the doc says, yeah, you can call numbers, but tomorrow morning your stomach's empty. Tomorrow morning that kid needs to eat. So a lot of the exploitation is based on a reality situation, not really that this person really wants to be exploited, but the reality of living. So I think that's one of the things that we really have to, that the only way you can solve these things it's through a national process, a collective process. There's no individual solution to sexual predatory situations in society. You know.
All right, brother. Thank you very much. Point made, point well
Yeah.
taken on board. It's a collective process this brother is alluding to. Thank you. Thank you, Zed.
Yeah. Plus, it's illegal. The answer is legal. You know.
But even beyond that, I think the point that the caller just made before you get to Pastor Randy, it boils back to governance.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
That word you call governance, because it starts at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the top there's a breakdown, because what you just described speaks to the whole question of our judicial system, maybe even our legislative system, and our administrative system. So they are all tied in together. So it's a question of governance. Yeah. And when a country is not being governed as it should, then obviously you have those breakdowns. You have where the law enforcement people feel they can do as and how they want. The persons who are elected to serve can do as and how they want. So it's a big issue. And I think too, that's why earlier I like the fact that Dr. Triffy made mention of the fact of community engagement. We have to come together again as a people. This is not something we can tackle all on our own individually. We have to come together as a community of people in Paybush, in Grand Bay, in St. Joseph, in Roseau, and all the various communities, and then come together as a nation and say, hey, this is where we are, this is what we want, and how do we change where we are to what we want? So I think the caller is on point, and it's not an issue that can be dealt with on an individual basis, or even only with professionals like Dr. Triffy. It's a collective approach.
It's too much. It would be
too much. But I think, though, if we can begin at that community level, there is hope for some change, if I may put it this way. But you may want to refer to to Pastor Radney comments.
Yes, you said it right. He's a doctor. He got his doctorate in theology of late. And so, yes. Dr. Randy Rodney writes, some churches initiate counseling programs. However, the application of some programs, he said here, require effort that needs financial and other support, as well as institutions to refer people to do that will help them. He ends by saying, additionally, some situations require physical and economic support. Would you support that, Doctor?
Absolutely. That's what I was saying, which is why that kind of process is got to be, it's a public health issue. It has to be looked at as a public health issue, because you need the resources to be able to make it sustainable. It's too much. Again, it's a heck of a lot, let's just say, so for the church, right? So that's what the pastor is saying, because you're doing other things full time. And the amount of effort is a full-time situation too. Like this is like your health system. Like you can't do two full-time things for a long time successfully. So it has to be thought of. It has to be created. It has to be maintained. It has to be supported. And it's a big issue. It's a big issue
indeed. Doc, it is 7:45. We have to wind down in the next 15 minutes as we approach the finish line, as it were. We spoke of the gravity of the situation as it relates to people's mental state of mind in Dominica, in the region, and further afield. Can we use the last 15 minutes thereabout to sort of give some kind of consolation, offer some help, some solution, some, sort of call to action, as it were? But I see Alvin hand is up before we go that route.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add exactly to what you're saying by way of a comment from one of our folks here, Marshall Lawrence, and maybe that ties in with exactly what you're asking, Dr. Triffy. And he says there, let's create higher level of dedicated support groups. Costly, but we can try. So maybe Dr. Triffy could comment on that. Let's create higher level of dedicated support groups. Costly, but we can try.
Yeah.
So to answer your question that you posed, Lofty, how can we start that and try at that?
So I've got a list.
A long one.
And I call them public health recommendations because I honestly believe it's got to be looked at as a public health issue. I have support groups. I have creating a helpline, training emergency room staff to assess people for mental health crises. Yeah. Therapy, more therapy opportunities, as in more trained people who are, I guess, feeling like it's a valuable and viable way to make a living in the country. Yeah. Medication support, because some of these mental health challenges do not go away without medication. I'm very sorry. Took me a long time to be completely on board with that. But after seeing people come into hospitals and they are not doing well, they're seeing things, they're hearing voices, they're ready to die. And after 2 weeks of taking medication, they're back to themselves. Yeah, there's a strong case for medication support. I also think spirituality is a protective factor. We have to lean into that more. But that piece, the other side where we become judgmental and hard, I think we have to work on that.
Talking about Dr. Tripping,
Yeah.
one just skipping right there. Talking about this spirituality now. Have you came in connection or came across someone being possessed with demons or demon possessed, and that was the contributing factor, read their mental state? I guess maybe a brother like Pastor Randy would be much more applicable, but how have you?
I personally have not, but I will say this. Here's how I'm going to say this. There are what we call attachments.
Okay.
There are what we call attachments, and we understand that we are body, mind, spirit, and that there are some things in spiritual psychology where we understand that there are some there's subtle energy, we call it subtle energy, which is like, the parts where you can't really touch and you can't really explain it away with mental reasoning. That does exist. And there is psychological treatment in spiritual psychology for what we call attachments, which are very similar to what's called possession.
Demonic possession. Okay. I was just asking because a lot of times some people see people with these mental issues and we call them mad, we call them crazy, we call them all sorts of names. And I was told that some people that is all that is wrong with them. They were under this demonic attack. Once that demon was freed from the body or the soul, whatever it is, then their life fell back on track. So
I'm one of those people who I'm grateful that I grew up in Dominica and I did have that, like we talk about that a lot, the spiritual aspect a lot. So I always leave room. I leave room for that. And, honestly, over the years have, let's say I am more open to leaving that as a possibility.
All right.
I realize I'm talking in circles trying to be politically correct. But
no problem.
The answer is some people say yes. Many people say
I understand. All right, but yes, let's get back to the
list.
The bucket list.
Yeah, back to my list. The list on spirituality. I want to talk about that a little bit because I think our spirituality is a strong protective factor against suicide, because many of us won't do it even though we feel like we're about to die. The pain is so much because we love God and we love our family. We don't want them to hurt. We don't want them to feel ashamed. But also that keeps some of us from asking for help because we think we should know better. We use that word, you should know better. You should know how to pray. But your mental health, your brain health, if you wouldn't use the same argument if you were suffering from diabetes, you ought not to use the same argument for your mental health, because it's brain chemistry for some of these illnesses. So if you're not going to pray your diabetes away, you should not be putting the expectation on your child, your mother, to pray their mental health away. Prayer is a strong way that we cope, but prayer alone does not heal many of these illnesses. So we have to think about that, and we have to talk about it in a more complete way, when we're discussing our spirituality. And I would say public service announcements like billboards, radio spots, where we're educating the public. We're a small public, so it shouldn't take that much, It shouldn't take that much to raise our awareness, to sensitize us. Hey, ask for help, ask for help, ask for help. And maybe Pastor Rodney can plead the blood of Jesus on these people we have in the system who really ought to be our rescue, who are hurting us, maybe.
He just responded based on the question that I asked earlier, and he said here, there are some people who are spiritually affected, he writes, and some suffering from other psychosis. When I meet with those who are in need, I then refer them to the psychiatrist. I have gone to the hospital to treat those who are demon possessed and were released in quick time. So
there you go.
Here is
I've had to evaluate people who the church wanted to be sure that there was not a mental health issue there before they did, like, say, an exorcism.
Okay. Joycelyn Green. Yes, Joycelyn Green. Alvin, hold on. Joycelyn Green says here, family and community support is very important with one's mental health. She talks about the management part of it. Ramona Dinard says, because we are spirit, soul, and body, this person writes, there is always a possibility of a spiritual attack because of what might be happening to an individual mentally. Let's take another call from the line, Alvin, and then we'll pull you in for your final comment. Yes, brother, good evening.
Yeah, Lofty, thank you. Sister Triffy, I see your difficulty and that political correctness. Lofty, we have some another program. We have to talk about prayer, Lofty. Because, you see, we have been cultured into this idea of treating prayer as a magical medium, but it's really a reinforcement medium for the individual. And I see Dr. Triffy try to get there, but we must do a program about that, because you're looking at the prayer as some magical medium, where it's really a reinforcement for you to help you overcome that problem, and we lost that in the way we've been cultured about prayer. I hope we can have a program on that.
Well said. So many of us, prayer is a way to cope. Prayer is a way to strengthen me so that I can do this. But we're thinking we need to use the prayer to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and we're weak, but
the color is right. But Dr. Triffy, I know we're coming down to the end, and Lofty asked for my closing comment. But quickly though, there are two words I want you to just speak very briefly on. Empathy and caring. Two powerful words, empathy and caring. And I think that's what we have gotten away from over the years when we talk about community engagement.
Yes.
Empathy and caring. Can you just speak briefly to those two words?
Yes, we're in I call it an empathy crisis. Yeah. Because we've moved very far away from us, from our essence as Dominicans, where, like I said earlier, when I would meet my friend, when my mother would meet her friend, when my father would meet his friend by the bay, they'd say, Sakafet, how are you? And we really meant it. And we meant it enough that we would change our plans. We might not even go to work that day because the stuff that was coming from the other person was so heavy, you ended up talking too late. You didn't even go up in the heights anymore. I watched it happen many times with my parents, many times. They would just not go to the garden anymore because they had stayed talking so long, it was too late to even go. They wouldn't have time to come back. But they stayed and they were present for the neighbor. Yeah. So it is that, and that was the glue. That's the glue. It's not touchable. You can't, it's not tangible. You can't touch it, but it kept us together. And it's a healing agent because that empathy will give you time to be able to see what's going on with me. You can refer me, really. You can say, my cousin can help you with this. Why are you worrying about that? Don't worry about this. Oh, this is what's happening with me. Perspective. So you don't feel like I am alone on this ship of life. We're not meant to do life alone. And people can be trained again. I don't think we would need much training because, like I said, that's part of how we made it through slavery. Yeah, taking care of each other. Yeah. So we have to decide, I think, survive or die. Like, we have to decide. It's not just, well, what is the other person going to do for me? Or what is the government going to do for me? Clearly, the people we have are not doing many things for us the way we need it done for us. So we've got to do it ourselves. And we got to remind ourselves that we know how to do it. And we didn't need government to do it for us in our parents' time and their parents' time. We figured it out, so we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Have to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. So, folks, it is 3 minutes to the hour of 8 o'clock. Alvin, let us get your wrapping up comments in just a bit. But before you do so, let us get Margaret, Dr. Triffy Wallace, that is, to sort of bring that all-important conversation on one's mental health, mental situation, mental issues, to sort of drive home some solid points before we, say goodbye to at least for tonight. Yes, Doc.
All right. Everybody's got mental health. Okay. Some days you're going to be doing great, and sometimes things in life are going to knock you off at the knees. When that happens, you might be in a place of suffering. There are many ways to cope. I think social support and social engagement are two big ways to cope. When it comes to suicide, don't be afraid to ask people questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Have the conversation. Yeah, don't run from it. Avoiding it is not going to fix it. Yeah. And when you reach a point where you realize, okay, this is much more than I can handle, it's time to step outside of that circle, go for help. I know in Dominica we don't have many resources, but at least start with your medical practitioner, your GP, your general practitioner. Go to the emergency room, talk to somebody else, ask for help, talk to your priest, your pastor. Many of them have training in pastoral counseling. Many of them do. And they've been trained to listen to. So just don't try to live life alone. We're not built that way. So that's what I'd say.
Well, thank you, Dr. Triffy. Appreciate. I think earlier on we said, well, 2 hours. Are we going to be able to do is there much to be said in 2 hours? But I guess we can go on for another hour or two, I'm sure. But we really want to thank you and appreciate your contributions this evening to Civic Vibes and to the conversation. You have touched on a number of areas, and I think that in itself was a mental health workshop 101. We have learned a lot, but I think though I'm leaving this conversation with hope. In all what you've said and the way in which you have summed it up, there is hope. And that is what we want to leave this program with as well, that there is hope for a better situation, for us to do better than where we are today as it relates to mental health. And certainly we will, I'm sure when we review the program as we normally would do, I'm sure there's a possibility of a part 2 to that. Well, like we said, we could bring in the spiritual aspect to it and have somebody on the spiritual front to come in and contribute to the conversation. But certainly a very great conversation. Thanks to our many folks who are still there with us that have posted quite a few comments and the folks who called in as well. So thanks again, Dr. Triffian, and we look forward to doing this again sometime in the future with you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Never worry. Why worry when you can pray? Life is a journey. I want you to know something right now. As I rise up in the morning.
That's the man, Cujo. He calls this one struggle. Brother said, a line in there is, why worry when we can pray?
You know I had a bad evening. I'll tell myself today it's gotta be fine.
Yes, folks, that is it for another very interesting conversation with Dr. Triffian Wallace. The state of our mental health issues in Dominica.
It's fine. Oh God. Some say, what has to be must be.
Someone says, Lofty, take this one from the very, very top.
Just right now, you got people like to shine. Just make it continue to shine. Want them to know that. Also, no one knows my struggle.
Yes, no one knows my struggle indeed. From the top.
Never you give up. Never you worry. Why worry when you can pray? Life is a journey. I want you to know something right now. As I rise up in the morning, I have to give praise to the Most High. Yesterday, you know, I had a bad evening. I tell myself today it's gotta be fine. Enough of them now I see you make it, but tell them say that's fine. Oh God, some say, what has to be must be. What is yours could I never be mine. Just right now, you got people like to shine. Just make it continue to shine. Want them to know that. Also, no one know my struggle. I know my pain.
Folks, that is on the high note, very high note, as Alvin spoke of earlier. We want to leave you after tonight's very, very informative program. Dr. Triffian Margaret Wallace, once again on behalf of Civic Vibes and the crew listening each and every Sunday, and those who will be listening to the recording thereafter, thank you very, very much indeed. You did justice to the topic / conversation tonight. And yes, folks, those all of you asking for part 2 and maybe part 3, there will be part 2. We at Civic Vibes, we are putting it together. So yes, we'll be making contact with some of our professionals in Dominica in that field so that you could hear from them directly. And as Alvin alluded to earlier, yes, we may be touching with some of our people in Dominica so that we could have their take on the mental health issue.
All right, then. Oh, them for you, the skeleton. Some mustn't have the time.
This brother's name is Cujo, and he calls this one struggle. 5 minutes past 8 o'clock, and that is where we got to bring down the curtains on things.
Some mustn't have the line. All right, then.
Just on a point of notice here, next week Sunday, if the good Lord above is willing, there will be no, I repeat, there will be no Civic Vibes program. So see you the week after. We realize that it will be in the peak, the height of the carnival celebrations. And so we're giving you that time to enjoy yourself, yes, but in moderation. So again, there will be absolutely no Civic Vibes program 6 o'clock next week. So please don't look for us on that platform. We're giving you guys that much needed break.
Well, we give thanks to life every day.
So until then, folks, see you. Enjoy what is left of tonight from Civic Vibes team. My name is Loftus Durant, ably assisted as well by brother Alvin Thomas. Tonight, our guest, Dr. Triffy Margaret Wallace. We bidding you farewell.
As I rise up in the morning, I have to give praise to the Most High. Yesterday, you know, I had a bad evening. I tell myself today it's gotta be fine. Enough of them now want to see you make it, but tell them say that's fine. Oh God, some say, what has to be must be. What is yours could I never be mine. Just right now, so got people like to shine, just make it continue to shine. Want them to know that. Also know I know my struggle. I know my pain. I know one knows my heartache. Come out of tears I shed like rain. Some me ask and say, some accuse me, and some me like way. But tell them say that's fine. Me say me have to work every day harder. Because me don't know say victory is mine. Just work hard for your want in a life. No bad mind, nobody man, you understand? Alright then, some me say, I say no, I know my struggle. I know